Dude, this is so much easier to just do a video. Hopefully you'll actually bother to watch this. I have no assurance of that since you rejected everything I said out of hand, but you indicated you were curious. So this is a very, very basic concept here. I haven't gone into deep details yet because this current concept is illegal. In most places, you can't legally do this. And when I say legally do this, what I mean is it won't pass inspection. So they haven't specifically made affordable housing illegal. They have de facto made affordable housing illegal. And they've done that by creating zoning and inspection requirements that you can't meet affordably. And that's intentional. So the ultimate effective end result is rendering affordable housing illegal. So for example, there are some places where no primary room is allowed to be less than 120 square feet. That's it. My entire container home is only 660 square feet. And that's if you don't put a lining on the inside of the walls. So my home could never be legal in such a place, even though there's apartments that are that small. You see what I mean? You see the problem? They have different little rules like that all over the country. Not every place, and it's different in all different places, but they have little inspection or zoning or building requirement rules. My hair looks weird. Little different requirements and rules that effectively make building an affordable home impossible, de facto making it illegal without actually saying you're not allowed to do that. It's illegal. So that's what I mean by it's effectively illegal to make affordable housing. So the first thing I would do is get rid of all those. The way you do that is you get rid of property taxes. Property taxes is the greatest theft on American people. It's impossible for you to own a home. I bought this home. I have the full deed and title to this home. I don't own it. It's not actually possible for me to own this home. This is a manufactured home, but it's been converted to real property, so it's now permanently attached to the land legally, which I wish they didn't do because my taxes would be even lower if it wasn't. But anyway, people do that because you can't get a mortgage on. It's very difficult to get a mortgage on a non-permanent conversion mobile home because technically it would make it a vehicle and there's nothing to stop a person from getting a mortgage, taking a home and moving with it. It'd be difficult to go after them, so they don't tend to like to give mortgages. So people will convert to real property in order to make it easier to sell because now people can get a loan. Anyway, beside the point, I would eliminate property taxes and I would render all property taxes on personal owner-occupied residences illegal. So now you could actually own your home because right now all I have is fee simple title. I don't actually own this. Fee simple title literally means the Crown owns the property and what I have purchased is first right of tenancy. But ultimate right of tenancy belongs to the state. If I stop paying my rent, otherwise known as property taxes, the landlord, the actual owner, the Crown, the state, will come and take the property from me and evict me. So you don't actually own it. But that's a whole other ball of wax. Step one, eliminate property taxes. Why? First of all, it's wrong, it's immoral, it's unconstitutional in my opinion. But second of all, it allows the next step in my process. The next step is to push back on these zoning restrictions that effectively make affordable housing illegal. How does getting rid of property taxes do that? Because property taxes are why those zoning restrictions exist. When your county derives its income from property taxes, then the county has a vested interest in those property taxes being as high as they can make them. Because the higher those property taxes are, the more money they get. Okay, so that makes sense. So they want to... Now, property taxes are based on value, so by placing these restrictions into the zoning and inspection laws, they are effectively inflating the value of the properties. One of the first things our last corrupt mayor, which we got rid of thankfully, was trying to do was to ban mobile homes. He wanted only constructed on-site homes to be allowed. No more mobile homes. Why? Because those homes cost more, which means you can charge more in taxes. My neighbor 3 doors down is paying, $1,700 a year in property taxes. I'm paying $500 a year in property taxes. This is why. Okay? They don't want that. They want more money for property taxes. Let me see if I can put this down. It's going to be hard to hold this up this whole time. That works. You have to live with seeing the light. So, by eliminating property taxes, we disconnect the income of the county from the value of the property. Now the county has a vested interest in increasing the population of the county. because that's how they're going to collect taxes now. So, for example, we have what's called a gross receipt tax, or basically it's sales tax. They just call it gross receipts tax for some reason. They gave it a different name here in New Mexico. So, obviously, everybody pays gross receipt tax when they buy anything. When you buy McDonald's, when you buy a gallon of whatever, gasoline, when you pay your electric bill, everybody pays a GRT tax, a GERT tax. So now they would have a vested interest in increasing the population, which is why my second restriction would be to have a minimum plot size per home, to avoid them just cramming people in as much as they can in order to increase their tax revenue. There needs to be a check and balance on that, okay? You're wondering, when are we going to get to the house? Well, this is all required to get there, okay? All this is needed in order to get there. Because, again, right now, the type of homes I want to build would not be allowed or permitted or pass inspection or be legal in most places under current laws. So, next. First of all, the infrastructure to build out an area is going to be provided for the same way the infrastructure for your home was built out, taxpayer funded, because there's no other way to do that. If you built the cost of infrastructure into the purchase price of the house, even your $100,000 homes would be physically impossible. The street that those $100,000 homes are sitting on, yeah, that's like $4 million. So divide that by the number of homes on that street. You're looking at what, $250,000 homes minimum? Okay, so yeah, we pay for the infrastructure the same way we always have, and that's with taxpayer funding. That's the only way you get infrastructure. So that covers running the three trunks to the home. You got water, power, and comms. And that covers running the fourth trunk to the home, and that's roadways. Okay? As part of running those pavements to these properties, you would also run driveway and pad to each property. So that would be part of running the roadways. So, and it would all be concrete, no asphalt. Okay, especially down here in the South where white is significantly better than black for solar radiation reasons. It's going to make it a lot cooler if you do everything concrete. It also lasts a hell of a lot longer. So it costs more to get it going, but it pays for itself in the long run. Concrete is superior. So concrete roads and concrete pads all laid down at the same time. So as you're running the road, you're also running the pad for each home. How do you know where to put the pads? Because they're all going to be cookies. We're going to cookie cutter everything. Remember when you ever play with LEDs? Okay, LEDs. Let's see, 20 years ago when I built my first string of LED Christmas lights, it cost me a small fortune. I had to take apart gadgets to build it because at the time, like if you wanted a blue LED, it was $7. People thought I was nuts when I bought my first Christmas string of LED Christmas lights, and it cost me $40. And I was thrilled when I got a coupon later and got a set for $33. Why the hell would you pay $33 for a $3 string of lights? Because it came with like 6 blue LEDs. That's $42 just for the blue LEDs. The blue LEDs alone paid for the whole string. Okay, so if you were a nerd like me, that was an easy, cheap way to get copper wire plugs, fuses. 40 LEDs I think was on there. Or 30 LEDs or something like that. It was ridiculous. Now, of course, today you can buy a string of LED Christmas lights for $1.99. Like literally, I can go on AliExpress right now and buy a 5-meter string of white, the most expensive Christmas lights for like $1.99. It's stupid cheap. I remember the 100-foot string of warm white LED Christmas lights at Five and Below for $5. That was just ridiculous. Why was that possible? Well, because of economy of scale. Now, that doesn't apply 100% to what we're doing because you also have labor involved. One of the reasons things like LEDs get so much cheaper, so much faster with economy of scales is because there's no labor. The amount of labor required to make one string is the same as the amount of labor required to make 1,000 strings. So as soon as they started mass producing these things, the actual material cost to make these things is negligible to zilch. It's the rarity. There's just not many. So your infrastructure cost is divided amongst a few. So it's expensive. But as you ramp up production, your infrastructure cost does not change. And your materials cost is basically zero. It's plastic and silicone, the cheapest available materials on the planet. So your materials cost increases this much, but your production increases this much. And so economy of scale kicks in very, very fast. That's why I'm going to lay the concrete pads at the same time as I lay the road. The cost of laying a concrete pad is pretty high. The cost of laying a road and then saying, oh, by the way, do those 20 pads at the same time is negligible. It's a very small change in price relative to going back later and saying, okay, lay that pad, now lay that pad, now lay that pad. So doing it all at once dramatically lowers the cost. They might even be able to get away with using no forms. I don't know enough about concrete work to know if this could work, but use a dozer or backhoe to dig out a deep enough square trench for each concrete pad, and then lay the concrete in there. It won't be pretty, it won't be perfect, but it'll be 6 inches thick, and it should be fine. We might even, because we'll be laying so much concrete, we might even find better and cheaper ways to do it. For example, do it without rebar. Find a way to do that, because that requires labor. So through all of this, the things you're going to look for is ways to reduce labor costs. You're going to want to reduce your labor costs as much as possible, not by paying people less. My plan is a failure if it requires slave labor. That means no one gets paid less than $50 an hour. Now, that's your going rate for this kind of work, and that's what people should be paid. The way I'm going to make it cheaper is by increasing efficiency. So now, instead of that person have to work a week to lay a house, they'll be working a day to lay a house. Well, there you go. I just reduced my labor cost by 1/7. And how do you do that? Legos. You make the damn things modular. It's that simple. You make it modular. And the way you make it modular, and this is where economy of scale really kicks in, you make everything identical. And let me tell you, it hurts me to tell you that, because I hate going into neighborhoods with cookie cutter houses where every goddamn house is the same thing. You're paying $350,000 for a house that's identical to your next door neighbor's. But you know something? This is affordable housing. It's to get people out of rent slavery. Affordable housing would also lower cost of living. It would lower the pressure on minimum wage. The pressure that requires it to be higher than what it is. It's never going to be $7 an hour. That would require a massive amount of deflation. But enact everything that I suggest. Eliminate direct taxes, eliminate property taxes on personal owner-occupied residences, and eliminate or enact universal health care, and you could have a $12 or $14 minimum wage. Okay? The actual dollar amount doesn't matter. It's about buying power. That's why people don't understand when I say in 1968, minimum wage is $14 an hour. No, it wasn't. It was $1.60 an hour. Hey, asshole. $1.60 in 1968 was $14 of buying power in 2023. So yes, they were being paid $14 an hour in 2023 dollars. Okay, so what the hell did I do that for? Oh, my phone is touching the screen. It's a touch screen. So how do we start off? We start off with Connex containers, sea containers. Why? Because there's so fucking many of them. They're so easy. They're so perfect. They're watertight. They're virtually indestructible. They're never going to corrode or rot or anything like that. Remember, we're talking about houses in the South here. We're talking low humidity environments. Think New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Southern California, northern Texas, parts of Colorado, places with relatively low humidity. They're basically the Southwest, the middle to Southwest of the U.S. That's where we're going to start, and there's more reasons for that later. Building a house for northern latitudes is far more difficult because you have winters, like real winters, to deal with. Like if you tried to build one of these houses in Pennsylvania, it'd be a lot harder because you need a lot more insulation and you need a lot more energy for heat. In the South, a heat pump will take care of you. Okay, and that's going to be important later for bringing down the cost of these homes. In Pennsylvania, I was spending, $600 a month to heat my house. Here, it costs $200 a month to heat my house. Big difference. And this is a big home. It's almost 1,500 square feet. So a 600 square feet home will cost a lot less. Okay, now, and some of the ideas that I have aren't fleshed out yet. Okay, I'm not an expert in all this, but all of it is feasible. Why sea containers? Because I can get a sea container for under $2,000. Delivered. Okay? Delivered. Now, right now, post-pandemic, sea container prices are whacked. Here in New Mexico, I was able to get a sea container for like $2,400. In New Jersey, I was able to get one for like $1,500 delivered. A little more if you want a fresher one. But these were all airtight, watertight. They were fine. I probably wouldn't actually use sea containers. I would probably have containers made specifically for this purpose. But in the beginning, we could start by using sea containers. Now, if you were to buy a sea container here in New Mexico, it's going to cost you about, pre-pandemic craziness, it's going to, because I know how much it is because I bought 3 of them. It's going to cost you about $3,000 for a container. That's because of where I am. If the government were buying these by the millions, go ahead, try and tell me they couldn't do it for $1,000 a pop. God, you try and tell me they couldn't do that. Use sea containers, $1,000 a pop. Government contract to buy a few million of them? Oh yeah, that'd be easy. Okay, so you're looking at $2,000 to $3,000 for the 2 containers, because each house will be made up of 2 containers. Okay, so you'd be looking at 660 square feet. I would also like to make the house pad large enough for a carport on the front, a porch patio on the side, and a 3rd sea container on the other side, so that in the future they could upgrade their home. For example, add a 3rd container, and now they're having almost 1,000 square foot home. If they get a family, for example, need more bedrooms, more space. Have space to add a carport for the car, have space to add a porch patio on the side, basically a big carport kind of thing to act as a patio. So make the concrete pad big enough to allow for that future potential expansion. Because again, the cost of making the concrete pad this big versus making the concrete pad this big is basically nothing. It's materials. The increase in labor is 20-30 minutes. I watched the guys do my concrete pad. They were skilled, but they were pretty quick at it. I think he had I had 2 500 square foot pads laid out, and he had it all done in an hour and a half. It took him they did about 40 minutes of prep work. Now he had a crew. It was like 8 people, so they laid down all the forms really quick. I'd say they did spend about 30 minutes laying out the grid. About another 30 minutes laying down the forms. Then the truck arrived, and in 45 minutes to an hour, they had all the concrete laid out, all the control lines put in, the brushing done, the milk smoothed out, all that stuff. And then he just, not because of where I lived, he had to give me instructions to hose the shit out of it every 30 minutes to keep it from drying too fast. And it worked great. 3 years later, the concrete's still perfect. No rebar, no nothing. It's still perfect. Nice thick pad. It's like 4 inches. It's bigger than that, but I'm just giving you an example. It's not literal. So it wouldn't be that long. You're probably looking at about, if we can eliminate the forms, you're probably looking at about an hour of labor. If we can eliminate the forms. For places that don't freeze, it might be even easier. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert at concrete, so we'd have to work with some concrete experts to find ways to hyper-efficientify this entire process. And so as the concrete sets, the trucks would come by and set down these containers. Now, these containers, the way I would do this is the way I personally would do this. I would special order these containers to come with what I need already built in. So, certain ports and openings and stuff like that, and connection points, overlap edges and stuff like that, whatever won't conflict with it going onto a container. When these containers are made, have those built into it. Because again, government contract millions of containers. Take advantage of your economy of scale. The infrastructure really wouldn't be built into the container because it still needs to function as a container. Eventually, I would want to stop using sea containers and to start using prefab containers actually designed for this function. So one of the biggest changes that would be made was, for example, the doors wouldn't be there, no doors, and then there would be, openings on the side to allow egress from container to container. You can take the wall off altogether, but then you have to build a wall. Why do that if you don't have to? Okay. Now, the way this would work, if this, for example, if this were the C container, and of course you would have two of these containers, so you'd have that much space. But if this is the C container, then you would have one wall, and that one wall would be the only wall to have water and electric. And the water, electric, and comm lines would have a universal plug on one end that would be designed by whatever crew came up with this, whatever committee came up with this to finalize. Because obviously I'm coming up with the germ of an idea, and a committee is going to have to come together of experts to figure out the best way to actually implement this. So I'm envisioning a universal plug, and that universal plug will have the connections for electric, water, sewer, and communication, so Ethernet, all built in. And this wire would run down the length of the inside of the building. Outlets would be built into it. Communications ports would be built into it. Water connections would be built into it. Everything would be built into it. And you would literally just riv nut or bolt or spot weld or whatever technique they decided worked best. Me personally, I think something equivalent to like a industrial riv nut would be best. This way it's serviceable in the future. Okay? And you would have fixed hard points along the length of the inside of the wall that would be built in from the factory. And the crew would come in with this roll that would have everything on it already. Literally, this is the electrical install for the house, okay? Nothing in the wall. This could be bolted right to the wall. You know that Romex that's inside of conduit already? That kind of a deal, okay? You would unroll this 40-foot length inside the house and go zit, 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 and screw it into the wall. That's it. You're done. You've just wired the house. All right, the electrical panel would have, there'd be a preset hole and opening for the electrical panel. Zip, electrical panel goes in. The comm and electrical connection right into the panel. On the back side, the input power from the electric company, plug into the panel there. Done. Okay, make this all Legos. Make this all universal. How can we do this? Well, by making every house identical. By making every house identical. So that much wire and connections and fittings, you're talking 40 feet, 300 bucks in copper. You're probably looking at about 800 to 1,000 bucks. Well, I'm going to do it for a few hundred. Just a few hundred. Because every fitting will be identical. Every outlet will be identical. Everything will be prefab. So I'm not going to Home Depot and buying, 3 electrical boxes and, elbows and joints and tubes and fittings. No, I'm buying millions of them all at once. So now instead of costing, $1,000, now it's $200. Because that is no labor, economy of scale. There's no labor involved in making that stuff. The only labor involved is installing that stuff. And now that I've made it this one single 40-foot line that you unroll inside the house, 2 people, 10 minutes, done. So they can do 6 houses an hour. Let's call it 4 houses an hour because they got to walk from house to house. Okay, so you're looking at probably 10 minutes. When you get the roll, they'll have a pre-designed tester. You'll plug the tester into one end, plug the other into the other end. It'll pressurize the line, make sure the fittings are all watertight, airtight. It'll pressurize, or it'll do a communications test for the Ethernet, and it'll do an electrical test for the electrical. Lights come up green. You unroll it. Zit, 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 zit. Screw it into the wall. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to do anything with fittings. No, nothing. We reduce labor, not by paying people less, but by turning this into a Lego project, by making it more efficient, by taking advantage of economies of scale. Kitchen. Even using off-the-shelf pricing, $269. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't $269. That was the cabinets. What was it? $1,900. And this is splurging. Keep in mind, this is off the shelf. This is not even using my economy of scale yet. Off the shelf. I could buy a 54-inch counter unit That includes a 2-range burner, a refrigerator, a cabinet, and a sink, and a countertop space. And then for $169, I can get an almost matching overhead 3 cabinet unit that's also 54 inches wide. So for $2,000, you got your full kitchen and your overhead cabinets. Now, how much do you think I could bring that price down if I make it universal and I tell you to make millions of them? Guarantee you I could bring that down to $1,000 or less, a lot less. The amount of profit built into some of these things is extraordinary. And you get to, now of course, the company needs to make money on what they're selling, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're saying, I'm not going to order one, I'm going to order 100 million of these things. Well, maybe not 100 million. Let's call it 10 million. Hell, let's call it 500,000 to get the project started. When I say I'm going to give you a long-term contract to make 500,000 of these things, and it's a government contract, so it's guaranteed, yeah, you'd be surprised how fast you can get the price down. And I don't want cheap garbage either. I want these things built for a minimum 20-year lifespan. Everything that goes into this house must be built for a minimum 20-year lifespan. Minimum. That meaning you could put a guarantee on that. I mean, obviously, you're not going to put a guarantee on wire and pipe and stuff like that, but I want it to be a high enough quality that you could. So no cheap garbage. We're going to make it cheaper, not by using cheap shit, but by using economy of scale, by making everything identical. How much do 500,000 sinks cost? A lot of money. How much do 500,000 of the exact same sink cost? Not nearly as much as you think. Okay, so there for probably around $500 or $600. That's going to be my seat of the pants guess here, seeing as how I can buy it off the shelf for $2,000, and that's relatively high end. I've seen all-in-one kitchen units for under $1,000 already off the shelf. I'm gonna lay my name online and say I can build this kitchenette for $300 or $400. Let's call it $500. Okay, and it's gonna be plug and play. There's gonna be riv nuts already in the wall that are scaled precisely for this kitchen unit. The crew is going to literally walk. 2 people are going to carry this unit in, plug it into the wall. It's going to go click. The holes are going to line up. And you're going to go zit, 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 6 bolts. Boom. It's attached to the wall now. And look at that. The fittings that were already laid out by the previous team that are laying out those 40-foot lines, well, there you go. There's power. Click. There's water. Click. There's sewer. Click. There you go. You're plumbed. Bathrooms, make it all one unit. Make a literal one piece, build it in a factory, ship it on to location. Because remember, shipping a bathroom from a factory, pretty expensive. Shipping several hundred of them under a government contract to a location, not nearly as expensive as you think. Okay? You can even make it a project for the military. Use it as a cargo transport project. They're already in the military. They already do things like this. So you can make it projects like that. That's part of why we have a goddamn military. It's part of why they're there. Okay? Now, instead of fighting for oil in another country, they're fighting for their own citizens here in this country. There's plenty of ways to make this dirt cheap. Have the whole bathroom unit, just haul it in. You'd have this one-piece bathroom unit, a shower, toilet, and sink. And they would all 3 would be against the back wall. Well, the sink, you could actually offset that because that'd be pretty easy to build the plumbing in for the sink into this unit. And you'd bring the bathroom unit in. A little forklift would bring the bathroom unit in before you connect the 2 halves of the house together. You'd drive the bathroom unit into the house, and as you set it in place, your crew would connect the fittings, or the fittings would come up through the wall, up through the floor, and then you would just go click, 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 whatever you do. Because remember, this would all be designed to fit together like Legos. Well, the whole point of all of this is to bring economy of scale, to bring down the cost of all these parts, and to reduce the need for labor. Keep the labor pay high and just reduce the hours so that way they get more done in the same amount of time. So you're still paying them properly, but we're not wasting months building a house. Literally, these crews are going to build a house in one day. And that's taking their time. That's relaxing, breaks, take their time, do it right. No shoddy workmanship. Everything's going to be made out of metal and hardcore plastics. None of this fucking MDF bullshit. None of this cheap thin gauge metal and plastic bullshit. Everything's going to be designed, military. Make it military. Okay, we'll make it pretty later with paint and stuff like that. Right now, we just want to get people in homes that they own instead of paying $1,200 a month in rent. Now, power for the rest of the house, not much. Okay, you don't need a whole lot of power. Your comms cable only has to be this long because you just put the router right there at the box. It's going to cover 600 square feet without a problem. So your communications, your phone, internet, stuff like that won't be a problem. And then you could have either have a crawl space under the house or just run it right across the ceiling, the metal roof, your conduit cable, extensions to the other side of the house for outlets. Okay? A 15 amp circuit for each set of outlets. Everything on a separate circuit. We want this to be nice and high quality. Not like these fucking mobile homes where, 7 outlets around the entire house are all one goddamn circuit. None of that bullshit. How much do circuit breakers cost? Well, they're not exactly cheap, but I'm making millions of them. Now they're cheap and high quality. Okay? And again, zip, 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 this stuff would all screw in. For insulation, what I would want to do is come up with some kind of a foam stucco mix that would be sprayed on the outside of the house. So there'd be a foam stucco mix that would be spray foamed on the outside of the house to take care of insulation and to keep it super, super simple. Let's see what else. Again, things like windows, dirt cheap, not a problem. Because we're making millions of them and they're all going to have the exact same windows. If you want variety, well, then go buy a regular house. If you just want a home to live in that's going to cost you, your mortgage payment is going to be half what your current rent payment is, then you get a house like this. Every house would have the exact same microwave. Every house would have the exact same range. Every house would have the exact same refrigerator. Every house would have the exact same heat pump mini split unit to heat and cool the house. Everything would be identical. Everything would be exactly the same from house to house. I can literally take a piece out of a house here, 1,000 miles over to here, and it'll bolt right into place. Because every single one is going to be built to the exact same design standard and the exact same quality standard and the exact same physical standards. Legos. Keep thinking Legos and Technics and stuff like that. That's how you use economy of scale to ramp up production. That's how you use economy of scale to bring down the cost of labor by making it stupid easy to put these houses together. You wouldn't even need skilled labor. How much skilled labor do you need to plumb and electric the house when all you have to do is plug a tester into each end and it tests all the conduits and lines and then unroll it and screw it into the wall? Because all the fittings are installed at the factory. All the wires and lengths are all in the factory. All the brackets that line up with the connections on the wall and the container are all done at the factory. It's how they're made. You literally plug in, test it, unroll it, zit, screw it into the wall, you walk away, you're done. When the sink crew comes in, the kitchen crew comes in, first cabinet, click. Overhead cabinet, click. Zip, screw gun, zip, everything with bolts, no screws, no drywall, none of that bullshit. There's no taping, there's no mudding, there's no drywalling, none of that shit happens. The inside of the house gets spray paint, go away. The inside of the house gets sprayed, white, everything is white. If you want to change the color, go for it, but everything default white. That makes the paint dirt cheap, so use good high quality paint. In some places, you might not even need to insulate. Although I would advise it because, even though summers are pretty easy to cool down here, all you need is shade. And if you cover the roof of this container with solar panels, that's going to provide you an air gap between the panels and the roof of the house, which is going to provide the bulk of your shade. Now that little 12,000 BTU mini split unit, you might need 2 for each container. That little 12K mini split unit, more than capable of handling that load. Grid tie all of the houses by default. So now you have a massive solar infrastructure to reduce the load. I'd like to see some improvements on that because ultimately solar is a dead end without batteries. So I would like to see batteries built into these homes eventually. Like a 4 or 5 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate battery, enough that these homes can go offline during peak time. So that like from 4:30 in the afternoon to 10:30 at night, when there's peak power, these homes will essentially go off grid. They'll draw off their battery pack, and a lithium iron phosphate battery pack built to good standards is a lifetime purchase. It will last the life of the home, 30, 40 years, no problem. And then they would charge back up. Obviously at 10:30 they would turn back onto the grid and charge themselves back up. If there's enough power, maybe even leave them off the grid and use the solar panels directly to recharge the batteries and still have the grid. So instead of selling the power back to the grid, use the power to power the home and then only use the grid when the power runs low. So you'd computerize all of that so that it would be automatic and the homeowner wouldn't even have to think about it. They wouldn't even know they're off the grid. That's obviously later when this technology gets a little cheaper. I think you could do it within my price range, maybe. You can get a 5 kilowatt hour battery for just a few $1,000s now, $2,000 or $3,000. So the battery prices are actually pretty cheap. It might even be doable with my $30,000 or $40,000 price point. My objective is $30,000 because a 10% actual interest loan at $30,000 is $550 a month for 5 years, which means you'd only have a 5-year loan, and your loan payment would be 1/2 of typical rent. Typical rent right now is $1,100 to $1,200, so half of that would be $550 to $600. We could probably push that to $40,000 if we had to, but I'd like to keep it under 30. That's a nice magical number, just mathematically speaking. All the light fixtures identical. They're basically going to be surface mount LEDs everywhere. All the windows will be identical. You'd group the houses together, I would think would be the best way to do it. So you'd have the houses grouped together, and you'd have a septic tank in the middle, and all the houses would plumb to that septic tank. I think that would be the best way to do it. It would depend on area. It would depend on land. If you have pre-existing sewer, you can pipe into that. There's different ways to do it, but out here, septic tanks are pretty commonplace. And as long as they don't have some bullshit, advanced tank requirement, they're not that expensive to put in. You're looking at, for a larger septic tank, you're looking at $7,000 or $8,000. You divide that by 5 houses, and you're what, $1,500 a house. And the houses would have a fixed sewer exit point, and so you would only have to plumb to that one point on the house. All the stuff in the house would be plumbed at the factory, to that point. So all you'd have to do is basically think of it like umbilical power for a rocket or a ship. You would basically lay down this home, install the infrastructure, and then plug the home in to the external infrastructure, whether that be power, comms, water, and septic. Some parts of these neighborhoods will be set out for commercial. So in the beginning, you'd have to build these in the outskirts of a town. So for example, in the beginning here would be Rio Rancho, for example. You'd build a bunch of these in Rio Rancho, which is just outside Albuquerque and Cottonwood Mall and stuff like that. So in the beginning, this would be just for people with cars, because they would have to have the ability to drive to work, unless, of course, we set up public transportation to move between these neighborhoods and the city, which would not be that far away. And because we're laying down good infrastructure, it would just basically be a single bus route. You design the neighborhood like a U, a big giant U, and the bus would come through that U and drive into town and drive back again. That would not be difficult to do. Eventually, the areas you set aside for commercial businesses would begin to get purchased and used for commercial businesses as more and more people moved into these areas, creating little suburbs. And then people who, wanted to walk or cycle, they would then be able to start moving into these homes because now there would be work there. This would all have to be planned out by people much smarter than you and me. But there's the basic structure for you. If you really sit down and think about this, most of the expense that goes into building a house is the lack of control over material costs, and the exorbitant labor costs. Not the cost per hour of the labor. That I don't have a problem with that. These people are getting paid a fair wage for their work, but we can make it more efficient without paying them less. By doing a lot of prefab work at the factory, by making all these homes identical. I could see, a couple of pallets. You'd have a big military cargo trailer come down, and there'd be like 3 pallets. I'm estimating about 3 pallets. 3 pallets for each house. And a forklift would just follow this truck down the neighborhood. Pallet 1, 2, 3 for house 1. Pallet 1, 2, 3 for house 2. Pallet 1, 2, 3 for house 3. And those pallets would contain your kitchenette, your mini split, your heat pumps, your wiring harness setups, everything you need for this house. Your doors, your windows, that would all be 1 pallet. And then, a second truck would come by with the bathroom units and drop off each bathroom unit. Actually, you might be able to go down to 2 pallets and then have it depends on how big the bathroom is. I think the bathroom's going to be bigger than a pallet, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely going to be 2 pallets on its own. So yeah, keep the kitchen stuff with the first truck. And the second truck come through would drop off a bath unit for each house. Use good quality stuff. We're talking, we would hire out companies like Delta and Moen and stuff like that to make all the fixtures to the highest quality standards. Again, we would bring the cost down not by making it cheaper, but by increasing economy of scale. Moen and Delta and stuff like that will let us get their higher quality products, and we will test it to make sure it is of the highest quality. Because again, I want 20-year minimum. Because we're going to be buying millions of units. So they're gonna salivate to get those kinds of contracts. They're not going to make a whole lot of profit on each one, but they're going to get a big lump sum up front as we pay out for these contracts, and they're going to be able to reinvest that money and make some serious profit from it. That's why companies are willing to do big discounts on big orders, because they're getting a big flush of cash right now that they can leverage. But that's it. Just turn it into a Lego project. We could start off with retrofitting in the beginning to get it going. And as we work the kinks out, as we figure out better ways to do it, as we figure out more unified and prefab ways to do it, we begin going toward custom constructions. Eventually to the point where the containers are custom made for the specific purpose. And there would have to be some legal restrictions on this stuff. So for example, no buyer-seller. These homes would be available for sale only, cash or congressional loan. The government would do its job and handle the money. And it would be owner-occupied only. You would legally not be allowed to buy one of these unless you were living in it. And because I don't want the sharks coming in, buying them all up, and then cranking up the price, by creating scarcity like they do now. And, artificially inflating the market. So there would have to be some pretty healthy restrictions on that to make sure that doesn't happen. What else? Nothing else is screaming out at me off the top of my head right now. But my objective would be $30,000 purchase price. And I think that's more than doable. I think that's exceptionally doable. I think you could do it for a lot less. But there's going to be a lot of bitching about this entire process in the beginning, because a lot of people are going to be losing a lot of money because their existing system of greed and profit isn't going to work for it. And we're going to be taking their candy, and they're not going to be happy about that. Let's see. I could even see the people who are going to be buying these homes being part of the crews that are building them. Offer them a discount on the homes in exchange for the labor to start putting them together. Remember, Legos. This is something that a 16-year-old can do with basically no training. Plug this into that. Plug this into that. It only fits one way. You can't do it wrong. If all the lights are green, you're good. If all the lights aren't green, unplug it. Plug it in again. If the lights still aren't green, go to the next unit. Put that aside. Go to the next unit. And then the higher paid guys would come by and take care of any anomalies. And as we ramped up production, as we ramped up economy of scale, this would get better and better, and we'd have fewer and fewer problems. A lot of people are going to lose when we do this. Well, not when, because we're not going to do this. Let's be honest here. We're not going to do this. Too many people are going to lose too much money. They will fight tooth and nail to prevent any of this from happening. But a lot of people are going to lose out on this. Landlords are going to lose out the most. They're gonna get hurt bad by this. But Crimea River, Crimea River, enslaving people to force them to pay off your mortgage so that you can rent out the house to them. Yeah, fuck you. Suck my dick. That's what I say. But yeah, what do you think? Give me some constructive feedback. Not you just reject it because it bucks all the norms that you're used to accepting. I've given you some pretty detailed descriptions of the path we can take to make this work. It's very viable. It's very doable. It's going to require government contracts. It's going to require, national, moon race type funding and effort and organization to make it happen. But we do that, it's entirely possible. I mean, hell, everything I just described to you is almost possible with existing off-the-shelf shit. I mean, we're within $40,000 or $50,000 using off-the-shelf stuff. I want to organize it because I want to increase the quality level and I want to decrease the price. So the loans would be through Congress and the interest would be 10% actual. Lower if possible, but no higher. 10% actual means your payoff amount is $33,000. Period. End of discussion. No arguments. No banks. Except the Bank of Congress. Okay? $33,000 is your payoff amount. Because your interest is $3,000 fixed. No APR bullshit. Okay? $30,000, 10% actual. That means your payment is $550 a month. You think a lot of people might be interested in buying a 660 square foot home that'll last essentially forever for $550 a month? Oh, and it's paid off in 5 years, and then you own it, lock, stock, and bond? You think maybe people might be interested in that? I could even see that working in our current tax system. Negotiate with the local counties to forbid them from taxing the value of the property on the land. So they can only tax land value. So now the property taxes for all these places would be like $200 to $400 a year. Land value tax, which is not that much. You can start off by doing that. That might be a way to shoehorn this process to get it going. No matter what the people do on this land, you can't increase their taxes based on what they do on the land. Only based on the value of the land itself. And that would have to be monitored and regulated because otherwise, counties are going to try to push to increase it. They're going to declare the land worth 10 times more so they can charge 10 times more in tax. And so that would have to be monitored and regulated. What else? I can't think of anything else. Matter of fact, the largest impediment to my plan is you're going to think this is funny, but this is actually a big issue. The biggest impediment to my plan is water. In all of the areas where land is cheap and the climate is friendly, meaning low humidity, low moisture, low salt, and mild winters, are places that are dry and arid. And those dry and arid places have a problem with lack of sufficient water supply. So that's something that will have to be addressed. You could build these houses in the southeast, the eastern southern part of the country. It would be slightly more difficult because infrastructure consumption will be higher. Your actual infrastructure construction costs will be lower because you're going to be closer to industry, but the higher humidity is going to increase the requirements for the home, increase the need for insulation, and also increase the power needs for heating and cooling. Not so much heating, but definitely cooling. Most of your cooling is moisture removal, not actual temperature reduction. That's why you can't put an oversized AC unit in a house, because what will happen is the AC unit will rapidly cool the house down to the target temperature, but not have removed all the moisture. So you'll still be extremely uncomfortable and nasty and icky. So you have to size the unit for the house correctly. Here, you don't have to. Here, you can just blast out a bunch of cool air because the humidity is 12%. So the moisture removal has already been done for you. You just have to cool the air, which takes very little power. It doesn't take a lot of power to cool air. It takes a lot of power to remove the water. So if we start moving east, when you get to mid-Texas and east, you start having humidity issues, and that takes a lot more power. Now, we could compensate for some of that with the solar panels on the roofs of the houses. So I would like to, since we're going to be making everything using standardized equipment anyway, let's get into some blue sky stuff that I would like to see happen. I would like to see more equipment be AC/DC powered, and have more equipment with the built-in functionality of being able to take a dual power source. It's probably going to take inverter-driven technology that can accept AC and DC input and then output its own clean power from that. So a small battery or capacitor bank to act as a buffer. But this way, for example, if your air conditioner needs, 3 kilowatts of power and you're generating 2 kilowatts of solar, okay, funnel the 2 kilowatts of solar into the AC unit and then draw 1 kilowatt from the grid. This way, you're only drawing 1 kilowatt of electricity for your electric bill. The rest is being provided by the solar panels. And be able to dynamically adjust that. Clouds go overhead, okay, you draw more from the grid. The clouds go away, okay, you draw less from the grid. I'd like to see more and more equipment designed with that built in. I have a few battery boxes that do that, where you can plug in AC power and solar power, and the box will give deference to the solar power if it's available, and only use the AC power if it's not getting enough from the solar power. I'd like to see, especially the larger stuff, I'd like to see that kind of stuff built in. It would even be possible to do basic lighting and ceiling fans completely off-grid. I'm estimating a 1 kilowatt hour battery would give me a very comfortable margin, a day or two, of power to run every single ceiling fan and light in my house. And just have that completely off the grid, because this is LEDs. So you're looking at 16 watts for the 2 lights. And how much could that fan possibly be drawing? 40 watts, 30 watts? I don't know. I'll have to actually put a meter on it, but it can't be much. And it's spinning so slowly, it just can't be that much. But I don't actually know, because most of the ratings I see include everything, including the incandescent bulbs. So I got to put an actual meter on that fan and see how much power it draws. For now, I've just been using its full rated power to do my calculations. So we might be able to get away with, a 600 or 700 watt hour battery. There's just different things we can do. Different things we can do to reduce the grid demand, to reduce the dependency. We would have to have some regulatory input to control monthly fees. A lot of companies are starting to charge very high fixed monthly fees to basically destroy any benefit of grid tying. No matter how little power you use, you still got to pay them, which makes sense to a point. If you're, if you have solar panels that are large enough to completely offset your power consumption, then who pays the power company to power you at night? Okay? So ultimately, solar panels are a dead end unless you also have storage. So we could use these housing projects to start working on developing and building out that kind of technology. One of the biggest problems that kind of technology has is cost, and the reason it costs so much is because of lack of economy of scale. Well, if we're building millions of homes, we've got the economy of scale. We can work on stuff like that and make it work when you have that kind of economy of scale. When you want to put a 5 kilowatt hour battery in a house and you go, holy shit, it's going to cost me $4,000. Well, now I'm building millions of them. Now maybe it's only $1,000 for that 5 kilowatt hour battery when you're buying that many of them. So different ways we can bring down those costs. We can bring down those economies of scale. And again, they would all be designed to specific standards and specific dimensions, so they are at the factory. All the work is done by the automated machines and robots that tend to build these things at the factories. I'd like to see those factories here in the U.S. Now, in China, they don't really use robots so much. They have ultra cheap labor. But I would like to start moving some of that here to the U.S. That's going to require automation, Otherwise, the cost is going to be a lot higher because I don't support slave labor. Anybody being paid less than a living wage is a slave. So I would like to see us, do that. And when you have this kind of numbers we're talking about, it might be worth it to bring some of that factory work here to the U.S., to bring construction work here, to bring it homebrew. I don't know. Whatever method we have to, let's do it. There is no financial reason we can't do it except for the people who are currently profiting from the current system. Your idea that that's a decent price for a home is based on your flawed ideas of how things are currently run, how things are currently done. And yes, I can see that being the price with the way you currently do things. But the way I want to do things, that's insane. That kind of price is nuts. And I'm betting most of that is land and labor. So we buy cheap land to do these projects. And we buy economy of scale. We make everything like Legos, so that we don't have to pay the construction workers less, but everything is going to be so easy and so plug and play and snap lock and Lego fit that they just simply won't have that much work to do. They'll be able to get a lot more done per $50 an hour wage, or 60 or 70 or whatever. It's entirely feasible. It's completely and totally feasible. And I can almost do it with off-the-shelf parts. I can almost make it happen with off-the-shelf parts. It wouldn't be that hard to order sea containers to our specifications with our fittings and connections designed into it. So that it'll have all the RivNut connections for all of our plug-and-play infrastructure that we're going to build into the house. And from the factory, they'll just have plastic nuts closing those holes, to keep them watertight and airtight. And so our crew would simply have to, remove the plastic plugs and zip, 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 screw everything in. Your plumbing and wiring would screw in like Legos. Your kitchen and bathroom would screw in like Legos. Your lighting across the ceiling would all screw in like Legos. Everything will be designed for plug and play, bolt fitting, no screws, no drywall, no MDF, none of that bullshit, nothing that rots, nothing that corrodes like that. Again, building houses in more humid environments would take a little more work. Building houses in the north would definitely take more work. You try to build a house like this in Pennsylvania, you're going to have a bad time. In a place like Pennsylvania, it might even cost twice as much. In the northern states where it's colder. So you'd start in the southern states until you got the economy of scale up. And then when you have to double the price to move up north, you're doubling the economy of scale price and not the original, custom price. So I think, my ultimate objective would be arid environments, $30,000, humid environments, $40,000, cold environments, $40,000 to $45,000. That would be my ultimate objective, and I think we could do better than that. I think we could eventually get it all down to $30,000. I think we could eventually get the housing in the South down to around $10,000 or $12,000, all up. And then you can basically subsidize the houses in the North with the extra profit you're making from the houses in the South, because you have two values for value here. You have the value and profit you make literally, and then you have the value proposition of what you're offering. So even if you can build the house for significantly less than $30,000, stick with the $30,000 price in order to subsidize the houses in the north that require more insulation, for example, and more heating and cooling in order to be, viable. Like, for example, the Northwest doesn't really need more cooling because the humidity is not really there, but the cold is. So they're going to need more heat. But in those places, geothermal might become very practical. You might be able to dig down and lay a giant geothermal net, bury that and then put your septic on top of that. So that you have a giant geothermal net to feed your quad of 4 or 5 houses, your group of 4 or 5 houses. I'd like to see like a 2-acre lot with 5 homes on it. And each home you would drive in, you'd have a concrete pad in the middle, and that would be a circle, and you each drive off of that. So you basically create a little micro neighborhood. And the geothermal would dramatically reduce both your heating and cooling costs, because you have that permafrost temperature stability down deep. That would be especially effective up in the northern climates. So being able to get that 50 degrees out of the ground would decrease how much heating you need to get from 50 to the 70 or 80 that's comfortable, versus going from the -5 outside to the 80 degrees that's comfortable. There's many, many different ways we can make that work, but you start off where it's cheapest. And then as you figure it out, as you perfect it, as you make all of this work, you start expanding into areas that cost a little more. And you take advantage of the savings and economy of scale you've built up to make those areas affordable. But it's entirely doable. It's completely and entirely doable. We just have to choose to do it. So let me know what you think.